we've covered a lot of troubled developments in video games, movies, and one wrestling organization here at What Happened, and they've run the gamut from drops in the sleazy bucket barely anyone remembers, to infamous AAA disasters that had something go awry, to absolute gems that impressed and delighted when they finally came out. But my fellow thugs, thugettes, and everyone in between, nothing really compares to the confusing, crime-ridden caper that was APB, All Points Bulletin, a massively ambitious, massively delayed MMO GTA sandbox style thing that some people, to this day, assume never came out at all, which I wouldn't even blame you for. This is because, on the outside, this project had everything going for it: an experienced team led by an industry veteran, financial backing, and its initial concept and art style being very much of the style at the time. But it turns out, no to all of those things, because while APB and the Scottish studio behind it, Real-Time Worlds, fell apart very, very slowly, it also somehow did so incredibly fast, going from a hotly anticipated industry darling to a financial flop that many aren't even aware of. So, what happened?
We're going to be talking about APB. We're going to be talking about rock roller shooting and killing. We have these lovely ladies here. We're going to give you some of these.
A big, but not the only reason behind the rise and very long fall of APB has to fall on David Jones, the OG founder of DMA Design, who made some games you might have heard of: Lemmings, Grand Theft Auto 2, and most famous of all, the breakout hit that truly cemented the 3D open world concept, Body Harvest. At the turn of the century, DMA Design was being shuffled around until it was bought and renamed Rockstar, but Jones was having absolutely none of it, resigning from the company to seek opportunities elsewhere. A few short years later, he founded a brand new studio, the aforementioned Real-Time Worlds, while GTA continued to explode in popularity by perfecting the art of gunning down polygonal pedestrians in true 3D space. Now, the first project Real-Time Worlds ever announced, all the way back in 2005, was in fact APB, and was clearly going to be picking up on what Jones had started with Grand Theft Auto. RTW had staffed up significantly in a very short period, because when you say the founder of DMA Design is starting a new studio, people tend to come running to get in on the ground floor. However, at the same time, a deal with Microsoft also came together in record time, and thus another project was quickly greenlit, which of course was Crackdown. No, not that Crackdown. Oh god, I love that box art. The other Crackdown. Yeah, that's the one. Anyway, this Crackdown's design was far more simple and straightforward than what David Jones wanted to do with APB. But since that would take a lot more time to cook, Crackdown was prioritized instead, so the All Points Bulletin wasn't yet going to be issued. Fortunately, when Crackdown super jumped onto the Xbox 360 2 years later in 2007, it made a splash and put Real-Time Worlds on the map, which would eventually help them in the struggle-filled years that were to come. Once it released, RTW shifted to focus exclusively on APB, which they wanted to be their defining title, and was described by studio executive Colin McDonald as being the bastard child of everything we've been striving towards the last 15 to 20 years, and a culmination of what David Jones always wanted to do from GTA and before Crackdown. Now, the initial promise was that APB was going to come to the PC and Xbox 360 as a console exclusive in 2008, which was something it absolutely would not do. Like they were way off with that one. At GDC 2008, David Jones showed off what really seemed to be the main draw of the entire project at the expense of almost everything else: the customization. In a lengthy video, he showed realistic facsimiles of noted cybercriminals: Peter Molyneux, Richard Garriott, Warren Spector, and of course the cold and calculating Shigeru Miyamoto. This, while technically very impressive, set a precedent for APB, which was to always big up the fact that you can tweak and control every aspect of your character and gang, but never spending all that much time on, explaining the rest of the game.
It's a sort of imagine a 100-player version of Crackdown co-op.
How can you not be excited about that?
Even its genre was a bit confusing, with Jones insisting it wasn't quite an MMO, but an MOG, which stood for Multiplayer Online Game. Wow, I'm shocked that MOG never got over.
Who's Mog, Kupo?
This is because the gang versus cop combat skirmishes were limited to 25 concurrent players, which definitely blurred the line between regular multiplayer deathmatches and an actual MMO. But because when you weren't in the middle of a mission, then the game world would be populated with way more players. Listen, when you're doing something new, you still need to be able to explain your idea relatively easily, something APB always struggled with. 2008 continued to be an eventful year for the game. Rumors started spreading that APB was in the process of being sold to Rockstar Games and would be transformed into a multiplayer spin-off prophetically called GTA Online. Real-Time Worlds denied these rumors, and if they were ever real, negotiations broke down behind closed doors, which isn't much of a big loss really. GTA having an online component? No way that would have gone on to be one of the biggest successes ever.
Fuck you! I'm gonna put you in the fucking ground, you laugh at me again!
Thus, Real-Time Worlds pushed on, promising its first online beta would be released in the coming months on PC, which didn't really happen. Its release strategy also shifted and was now targeting a PC-only release at launch, but now with even vaguer console porting plans in the future. Also, the game was quietly pushed to 2009. Once that new year came around, things continued to change on the business side. A lot. Reportedly, $50 million had already been spent on APB thus far, and they were just getting started. You'll notice I haven't yet mentioned the publisher of the game yet, and for good reason. It's a complication in an already complicated story. Back in 2005, Real-Time Worlds had signed on with Webzen, a South Korean company specializing in online games. They were the primary source of funding for APB, that is, until Real-Time Worlds bought back the global publishing rights sometime in 2008. That all then changed when our good friends down at EA were persuaded to dump even more money into it. But unlike many EA-centric stories we've covered in the past, i.e. all of them, they were not at the core of the many things that were still to go wrong. EA's involvement seemed to be limited to simply providing some additional funding and publishing the boxed game through their EA Partners initiative. Real-Time Worlds wanted to retain the rights to the IP for themselves. Over the course of 2009, more announcements would come that would again focus on customization rather than the actual gameplay. Vivoc's chat technology was licensed, which will let players customize their voices in-game to better reflect their character, as well as implement 3D positional audio. And finally, Last.fm was also going to be used to allow players to curate their own licensed music playlists. These additions apparently caused the budget to balloon even faster than CJ on an all-burger diet.
Say hello to Big Daddy, bitch!
Things got even worse when the first public beta was released in October of 2009, which was more than a year behind schedule, and then got even worsier when the overall feedback from said beta was very much not good at all. Many cited that even for pre-release code, APB was incredibly unstable, unfinished, unfun, and other adjectives that started with un, so it was delayed another year into 2010. Its next big push was logically at E3 2010, which featured an elaborate, e.g. expensive booth to try and dazzle onlookers. At this point though, the game was being outshined by a number of other open world titles like Fallout New Vegas, AC Brotherhood, Just Cause 2, and Rockstar's own Red Dead Redemption, which was set to dominate the genre for the next couple of years. So, any hype the game did have was quickly being snuffed out by the competition, which was growing at a geometric rate, and I haven't even gotten to the Action District's business model, which we'll get to later. Yeah, fuck it, let's get to it right now. For $49.99, you got the full retail game. Once installed, whenever you are customizing your character or doing non-action social things,
My
You are granted unlimited time in which to do so, but your time in action districts, basically the areas that encompass all the missions, were limited to 50 initial hours. Once those 50 hours were up, you had to pay for more if you wanted to keep robbing cops or killing banks. That gameplay loop was the only way to level up your character, as you couldn't do so outside of missions, so killing NPCs or destroying the environment was basically pointless. Now, if you did indeed want those additional hours, you would have to pay for $7 for an additional 20, and if you carried the two, you would then equal that out to a 1/3 chance to opt for the 30-day monthly package, which if you multiplied that by your 77% chance to spend an additional $9.99, that would give you the unlimited time at best in the social or action districts until your match with Samoa Joe at Sacrifice.
The numbers don't lie!
Anyway, David Jones tried to make sense of all this madness with the following. We wanted to provide a simple and flexible way for occasional and core players alike to pay for their play without being financially tethered to the game. The model also provides an opportunity for customers to subsidize their costs by leveraging their talent or market savvy in the points marketplace. Highly talented players could potentially even play for free in this way, Jones said, and because of this, APB shouldn't be compared to the likes of subscription-based MMOs like World of Warcraft, and that they were going after a different demographic, despite the fact that he would go on to directly compare them. If we have a big success with APB on the scale of, for example, World of Warcraft, then we could be looking at hundreds of millions of pounds. It just depends what happens after we launch it. Try to take a guess on what happened after they launched it. When the game released in late June, early July of 2010, a review embargo was put into place, but it wasn't a one-day embargo or 2 or even 3. Real-Time Worlds and EA wanted to delay reviews a full week after the game's launch, and while they stated this was to give websites ample time to experience the full rich experience of APB as it is meant to be seen, its real purpose was pretty clear.
We've got to have money.
The game landed with a fart, with a 50% average according to Metacritic. And guess what? The vast majority of the positives were indeed centered around the game's almost limitless customization options, while its negatives were centered around everything else. The game was still incredibly buggy and unstable, and even its basic mechanics like shooting and driving were also criticized for being shockingly unpolished. The fact that the game kept shuffling publishers, betas, and release dates absolutely hampered its launch. This is because by the time it had released, $100 million had been spent on just its core development, not including marketing. This launch was so disastrous, the reviews so mediocre that David Jones sought to deflect, claiming that reviewers went in expecting GTA and a written narrative. The game has almost zero story elements, by the way, and simply didn't understand what APB was trying to do. Even if there is a modicum of truth to that, it didn't address the game's many basic functionality issues, which was a common complaint. Anonymous employees at Real-Time Worlds in a piece at The Guardian cited that many lower-level staff felt that the game was going in the wrong direction from the start. However, these concerns were brushed aside because everyone assumed it would all come together in the end. While it's not inaccurate to say that one person who works on a specific area of a game can't see the whole picture, this was something brought out by multiple employees in multiple disciplines at multiple times. When you're working for someone like Dave, it's all too easy to not believe what your ears and your eyes and QA and beta testers are telling you. You're like, Dave knows what he's doing, it's going to be fine. The team was saying for a long time that there were things that were not quite right with the game. It was never the case that the design was fundamentally broken, but in the execution of a lot of the features, there are things that didn't quite come together, that weren't polished to the level that people expected. The problem seemed to be that APB was very much designed in a mechanical, bureaucratic way, which definitely contributed to many issues down the line, as it was supposed to facilitate more creativity on the user's part rather than the game. The middle management, and there was a lot of middle management at this company, they were on that game for years and they continued to run it as though they were managing an architecture project or something. Fun never seemed to be a criterion for what they were doing. Managers with little clipboards would go around and tick off things, saying, okay, that's done, and then moving on. There was never any consideration for whether or not what had been done was any fun. Real-Time World staff also saw some red flags months before the game's launch, which didn't even have anything to do with the development itself. An email from upper management was sent out saying that janitorial services at Real-Time World's offices were being phased out, as they wouldn't necessarily be needed. It's stuff like this that made employees fear for their jobs, which was extremely warranted, as 150 employees were given the boot in August, just a month and some change after the game's debut. The studio's other 50-some employees were told to sit tight, while all the fat cats at the top decided what to do next, because failure hadn't really been part of the plan. It wasn't apparent that there had been any contingency planning. We all expected APB to be this massive success. We all expected to be printing our own cash, a la Blizzard. I feel like our exec team got out of their depth. I don't mean that in a cheeky way, because we were all out of our depth, but it kind of felt like it was a train that was out of control, and had been out of control for a long time. Unfortunately, this train very much left its passengers high and dry, as evidenced by a blog post from XRTW staffer Luke Halliwell. I must say I was shocked at how quickly it went down in the end. It felt like we were being let go decently and then boom, not getting paid anything. Owed last month's wages, our notice periods, redundancy pay, and unused holidays. A substantial amount of money all told. As you can imagine, Luke's wife was a lot less forgiving in her own online statement, saying that the heads of the company, David Jones and Ian Hetherington, could have paid the severance packages of all 200 employees out of their own significant wealth if they wanted to, which they didn't. Now, in most normal circumstances, this is where a story such as this would end, but it doesn't, and in fact is still kind of ongoing. First, and this shouldn't surprise you, the Xbox 360 and PS3 ports never came out, as Real-Time Worlds announced in September that they would be shutting down servers for good, but not before online company K2 Network swooped in to purchase the rights to the IP for a cool $1.5 million. That payment, of course, went to David Jones and other executives, instead of all the jobless people left in their wake. K2 then announced that the game would be relaunched midway through 2011 as APB Reloaded and become a free-to-play title, scrapping the Action District nonsense altogether. They indeed were able to keep the game going long enough that, again, for some reason, Deep Silver got involved in 2015 and announced they would be publishing Reloaded for the Xbox One and PS4, which actually did happen in 2017. And for those of you out there that assume that Reloaded would be greeted with better reviews, I'm delighted to tell you that you're wrong. And in fact, it reviewed slightly worse. Oh, and we're not done! Little Orbit then came into possession of the rights to APB, selling some of them to yet another company called Unit Game, whose intent was to release specialized versions for the Asian market. Little Orbit's plan, as near as I could find, was to continue maintaining and improving Reloaded for North America and Europe, which still has around 200 people playing per day, according to Steam. Holy shit, what the fuck? As for David Jones, well, he wound up co-developing Cloud Engine, technology that focused on cloud-based computing. What did he use that technology for? To open yet another studio, Regent Games, which would go on to provide the bullshit cloud solutions that powered the commercial and critical flop Crackdown 3, which I guess I'll have to talk about in the future. If you know of any other oft-delayed disasters of video game development, good or bad, let me know in the comments below, over on my Twitter, or ride or die over to the Flophouse VIP gang hideout and become a big boss and nominate the subject of a future episode. See you next time, and thanks for watching!
I wanna be